welcome back to the Nutrition Blueprint podcast. This is Coach Andres here, registered dietitian and your host for NBP. Super excited to be here today because today we're talking a little bit about mindset. And before we kind of get started into the process, I wanted to make sure that you guys know what we got going on in our world right now here in nutrition. Before we do so, if you're watching this on YouTube, I want to turn out like my little lights in the background so it looks like a lot more dope. So let me just make sure that I do that. Of course, if you're listening to this, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But anyways, what is going on, guys? Hopefully you're doing well here today and that you enjoyed our previous episode where we cover everything from female reproductive health and nutritional changes that you would need to make if you're a woman. If you're a guy, you probably need to also learn this information for your wife, your spouse, sister, friend, whatever, and how you need to be making nutrition changes based on some of those different things. So, but today we're going to be talking a little bit about something different. It's going to be more mindset specific. And I don't know if you knew this, but we have actually completely shifted our program. And we're talking about coaching. So if you're it's your first time listener, what we do in our, Planos is essentially a nutrition coaching process or platform in where we're teaching you how to completely build a blueprint for your lifestyle, not only nutrition, but also and everything from mindset, from stress management and everything. And we build a program on 4 pillars. And the way we explain it is that we believe that in order for you to achieve the best version of you, whatever that may be for you, it could be a body composition goal or like a better relationship with food or all those different things like that. We have realized that it's not just what you put on your plate, but it's also the context in which that plate is put upon. So, your environment, your context, what you're surrounded by, your mindset. So we realized that there's 4 important pillars of health that are going to help you accomplish that. And we created a program that helps you tackle and build upon each one of those. Pillar number 1 is going to be nutrition. And we try to focus on the tactics of the learning. So not only the macros, the calories, but figure out exactly why do we make those decisions for you and how you can make them yourselves. The second thing we focus on is going to be your lifestyle-specific factors, which are going to be including your sleep management, your stress, playing an organization, because people don't plan to fail, they just simply fail to plan. And we try to figure out that aspect of it and try to help you and coach you through improving that area of your life. We move on to this aspect number 3, which is we're going to be covering here today, which is going to be mindset. We literally build a program that helps you actually strengthen the way that you see yourself, the way that you see food, helping you eliminate that diet mentality and help you build a stronger relationship with food, which is something that we sometimes have struggles with and we don't even realize it. That's number 3. And then the last one is going to be focusing on movement, training, exercise. How are you incorporating that into your day? And is it making sense for your goals right now or is it not? Promoting, obviously, recovery and rest and making sure that you kind of improve all that area of your life as well. So literally, we call that the nutrition makeover method, which is literally a completely transformative journey to help you kind of get from point A of frustration, not really happy where you're at, really struggling with the mental aspect of things in regards to the choices that you're making and going over and over and over different diets and methods that are typically failed or they're failed attempts because they may work for a while but they're not sustainable, and we're trying to kind of get rid of that so we can kind of fix that once and for all so you don't have to rely on anything or a diet or any kind of quick fix or method for the rest of your life. If you want to find out more about that, the best way to do it is, number 1, to join our private Facebook community where we talk about this all the time in there, and we actually do a lot of trainings that are free and teachings. But if not, there's actually a link on the show notes which you can directly apply to be a part of our program. And spots are limited. We have 3 coaches in our team, and they're incredibly amazing. But what I forgot to even mention, our program is actually also a hybrid program, meaning that not only you're working one-on-one with a coach, but you're also are part of a group program. So essentially, I took the best of both worlds because you see a lot of nutrition coaches out there right now. They're doing group programs. They're doing one-on-one separate. But I wanted to do everything all in one. So that's why we're super proud to present that we're open for enrollment for the Nutrition Makeover Method, which we would love for you to be a part of it. So without further ado, let's get started into this conversation, which again, if you're watching this on YouTube, it goes in line with the presentation, but of course that is not going to keep you from affecting what we're going to be covering here today. So let me just kind of like go back to here to make sure that we kind of get into it. Perfect. So the conversation and the topic that we're going to be covering here today, we call it Planning for Progress, Not Perfection. And the subtitle of it is going to be How Imperfection Sometimes Drives the Best Results. We live in a world, particularly nutrition, that is driven by being perfect about everything that you're supposed to do. And if you don't believe me, like you can kind of like think about like diets that you've ever done. So, and a lot of times that perfection can sabotage some of your results. Sometimes that brings a lot of consequences that we're going to be talking a lot about. We're going to talk about the power of tiny gains. We're going to talk about perfection versus progress and the differences between the two, and also the strategies for achieving progress, even if it's minimal, but it's going to amount for larger gains in the future. And that's really what some of like my areas of work that I have, really kind of paid a lot of attention to in the past few years, because I believe that is in this consistency and this, again, like, small progress that you're going to be able to see the most sustainable changes in your life, regardless of the area of it, whether it's work specific, finances, business, and I apply this to myself in every single area that you can think about. So how does, like, the first thing that is important for us to talk about is, like, how does perfection really sabotage your results? If you're perfect, technically you should be achieving things faster. And yes, you do actually achieve things faster, but the problem is that perfection is exhausting. And you probably like listen to this and you're like, yeah, you're right. It's pretty tiring to be perfect all the time, isn't it? When people start diets, they always aim for perfection. And you think about it, every single time that you've ever joined into a program, you're motivated, you're excited, and you're like, yes, I'm going to freaking crush this, and I'm going to like do amazing. And you typically do. That's the thing about it. Like, that's why this like diets and all these different things are such a, they're, what's the word that I'm looking for? They're tricky because like they work, guys. Like they're helpful, because they give you the quick results. Now, the problem with that is a lot of times that people start to see dieting as being good and eating anything off the plan is being bad. So if you're not perfect, you're wrong. And if you are perfect, you're right. So if you're perfect, you're eating all the right things on the list that you were given. If you are imperfect, and which is obviously not what's going to help you get to your goals, quote unquote, then you're going to be like bad. So what happens in this kind of like scenarios? You have that all or nothing mentality. So either you go all out or you simply don't do it at all. One unhealthy, quote unquote, food leads to a whole day of overeating because, well, you, quote unquote, ruined your day. And that kind of leads to that mentality. And I think there's a podcast here, like I think I've heard it, that is super famous, which is called Diet Starts Monday, which is, again, starting over every Monday of the week. Or you can kind of say it every month or every new year, right? So a lot of times, like, we kind of extend that into not only a week, but also sometimes a month, sometimes like a year completely. I'm just going to wait. Like right now, I got too much stuff going on, so I'm just going to wait until next year to start into this process. And again, that's frustrating and exhausting. If when you look back and to start to think about this, you're like, wow, yeah, I realized that I have done this so many freaking times. Isn't it? Like that's just the reality. So perfection, I think we can all agree that a lot of times it's just too tiring, right? So what are some of those consequences, really? And one of them obviously being tired. So of course that's one of the big things that we're just talking about in here. But we're just gonna call that burnout. Your burnout of just trying to do all the things by the book all the time. And motivation starts to kind of like get down. Particularly because a lot of times perfection leads to just not only burnout, but eventually when you're creating so much progress, let's just kind of take the weight loss example here, and you're so perfect and you start to not see the speed of results that you were previously seeing when you started, then motivation starts to kind of like dwindle and starts to go down. And whenever motivation is low, then you start making bad decisions. And it goes back to the all or nothing mentality, where if you didn't really go all out, then obviously you're doing something wrong, so you might as well just screw it all up altogether. The second consequence that happens as a result of perfection is like you lose self-trust and feeling, and you have those feelings of just being defeated. right? You're like, you screwed up, man. Like, you didn't really do anything. Like, you can't do anything else. And then you start to really think to yourself, like, I can't do this. Like, I'm just not made for this. And you start like finding external things to blame things on. So like, well, no, it's probably just my genetics, or I'm just like too busy right now, or I'm a mom of 3. Again, no offense. I'm not a dad, so I'm not trying to judge you here. But again, like, I have worked with all kinds of people that worked in all kinds of different jobs, from working in an office for 14 hours a day to people that have completely way too much time in their hands, and they all always find excuses, right? So, but a lot of times, like, you start to blame those things, and that kind of leads to, like, losing that self-trust. You just can't do it. You start to lose consistency, so you lack the consistency that you really need, because it's all that all and out. And you're always in that on and off switch, in what we call, like, in your diet plan, right? So like, you're on a diet, you're off the diet, you're on the diet, you're off the diet. Like, it's this switch that goes on and off, like, multiple times a month, multiple times a year. And it's like every single time you're taking a couple steps forward, you're taking a couple steps back. And before you know it, a lot of times you take like 3 steps back when you're taking a couple steps forward. So you realize that you're worse than when you started in some cases, or sometimes it's just in the same exact spot. And that, again, can lead to the things that I just mentioned before: low motivation, losing self-trust. And overall, none of the things that you're doing are actually helping you shift towards healthier habits, because you're just so focused on what you're putting on your plate and making sure that it's perfect, and making sure that you don't have the cookie, and making sure that you can't really have the cupcake, and everything needs to be green, and whatever is the dietary method that you're following through here. And that, again, those are some of the consequences when you're trying to kind of be perfect about your health and your diet. So there's a book, there's a guy, his name is James Clear. Maybe you're familiar with him. And he wrote a book called The Atomic Habits. And he talked about, like, in general, the whole idea behind the book was talking about, like, the importance of building small habits. And he actually broke habits into its anatomy. Really, every habit, it's literally built on 3 or 4 components. Well, I think he mentions 3 components. I always think that bad habits typically have 4. So typically a habit is built upon, like, 1 is a trigger, something that kind of causes something for you to do something. Second thing is the doing that thing, which is going to be a routine. And third is going to be the reward. So it's like, what do you get in exchange of you doing that routine? So if you think about, like, morning time, brushing your teeth, that's a habit. It's triggered by you waking up and that feeling in your mouth of, like, you have bad breath. The routine is brushing your teeth, and the rewards and feelings of freshness when you have in your mouth after you actually brush your teeth. Otherwise, it feels weird. In nutrition, for example, it's a cup of, let's say a cup of coffee. The trigger is typically going to be like waking up in the morning or getting into the kitchen. The routine is like making a cup of coffee, and the reward is like the smell of a warm, nice cup of coffee in the morning, right? So every single thing that you do in life is a result of a habit. Now, typically bad habits are also followed by guilt. When you actually had the donut because you were just driving by the donut store, and that was the trigger. The routine was getting the donut, but you ended up getting 3 because why not? Right? And then, like, the reward is like that feeling of satisfaction, but then 2 hours later you're like, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. And one of the things that I don't want to get too much into habits, because I've talked about this in the past, but one of the areas that James Clear speaks a lot about is, he calls it the power of tiny gains. And I'm not great at math, but essentially what he did is, like, he started to figure it out when you kind of applied a little bit of math and you kind of power 1% to improvement to 365 days of the year. So if you talk about, like the I guess, like, it's similar to like compounding interest, right? Or something like this. And if every single day you're 1% better, you usually are going to be almost like 38 times better by the end of the year. That's mathematical stuff in there. Now, if you take the opposite and you subtract 1% worse every single day, you actually, according to some of this mathematical data, screwing things up is actually a lot harder, because literally like it's really difficult for you to kind of like get 38 times percent worse. Like literally, this is mathematically speaking. Again, like he literally, when I look at this, it's like 1.01, which is 1% better, elevated to 365 days a year. And that literally gives you 37.78. Again, I'm not going to get too much into the math, but he talks about the idea that if you focus on being 1% better, it's going to outweigh the idea of being 1% worse every single day, because your gains, the return on investment on that is going to be so much more higher than obviously trying to focus on being 1% worse. So what is 1% better for you every day? Because I'm going to stop talking about math because I'm literally like losing my mind here. But seriously, what is 1% better? 1% better, for example, is like when we look at nutrition is, man, like I have my bottled water here. It's drinking, one more water bottle today. Or perhaps is, choosing to cook one meal instead of like eating out 3 of them at home. That's being 1% better today. Everybody has a different definition of what that is, right? But a lot of times we focus on trying to be 100% better every day. And that just makes it so much harder to maintain, because we place such a high expectation on our goals that we forget the small things. So let me give you an example in the context of nutrition of what perfection is versus progression and consistency means. And perhaps you may feel related to one or the other. Perfection is going to be never eating out, never eating foods that are considered unhealthy, never having a cookie, never having carbs, or never having this. Insert blank. All of you guys have preconceived ideas, pre-wired ideas of what's unhealthy in your brain because you heard it on the radio, you heard it on a podcast, you heard it on from your mom when you were a child, whether it's butter, sugar, meat, like there's, you name it. There's always something that is going to be unhealthy, right? So perfection is like never allowing yourself to have those things because those are things that are unhealthy and that are bad for you. That's perfection. Perfection is going to be following a meal plan to the T, even when you don't like it. Like you were giving a generic plan by a nutrition quote unquote coach, and he's like, or she's like, follow this plan. Now, if you follow the plan, you're going to get incredible results. But you hated your life in the process. And when you were done with it, you were like, thank God I'm done with this. And what are you going to do after you're done? You're not going to go back to eating the same thing you were eating daily because you were so sick of it. I remember Gibi, my fiance, which we're getting married in literally like a month now. So she's going to be soon to be called wife. But she worked with a coach at some point. And with my consent, I was like, yeah, like a lot of times, like, I'm not going to be the best person to coach you. I mean, we live together and all that. So she worked with the coach, and this guy had her eat salmon, sweet potatoes, and asparagus, literally like 5 or 6 days out of the week. I kept my mouth shut, of course. I was like, Gibi started seeing incredible changes. She started losing weight. She started all these different things like that. It took her a couple of years before she can actually smell salmon again, taste sweet potatoes. And to this day, I think she's not even that fond of asparagus, right? And when she was done, it didn't really take her too long to actually kind of revert back to where she started. So it wasn't worth it. Okay, so that's being perfect. Tracking every single ounce and gram of food. This depends on the person, of course. But there's a difference between tracking what you're eating and tracking with obsession. Okay, there's a big, big difference in there. Working out 6 to 7 days a week when you're originally just working out one time, that's trying to be perfect. I see this all the time with people that start working with me. Like, okay, Andres, I'm ready. Like, how many days a week I'm going to be working out? It's like, well, how many days a week are you working out right now? It's like, dude, 0. Okay, we're going to start with 1. How's that? I was like, that's it? Yes, that's it. Because I want to make sure that in 6 months, you're working out 3 to 4 days a week consistently, not necessarily just like falling off the program because of the fact that you're just trying to go too fast. Not ideal. So what is progress? in contrast. Progress, for example, is adding more vegetables to your lunch because you never used to do that. And now you're starting to add maybe some carrots. That's progress. Progress is going to work out 2 times per week versus 1 time that you used to always work out, or perhaps going to work out 1 time consistently to an entire month per week, when in reality before it was like a hit or miss. Like you would go 5 days in 1 week, and then you would go like 0 days for 2 weeks, and then like repeat the cycle. That's progress and consistency. Eating out less and cooking more meals at home, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be completely saying like, I can't have meals out. Not ideal. Adding nutrient-dense foods to your diet that make you feel good, but still enjoying some less nutrient-dense foods that you love the taste of because they make you feel happy. Because in that, consistency relies on. So when we start to look at a lot of these different things, we realize that, and hopefully by this point, I have already convinced you that perfection is not the road to success. Because we're so focused on getting to the top or getting to the goal that we tend to forget the smaller things that are happening in front of you. And I'll explain what is in a minute. So to our clients, what we typically teach is like 3 simple strategies to make progress every single day of your life. Literally, if I told you like, hey, I have this like 3 things that you can do here today that literally are going to help you progress one little bit every single day. Like, would you like to try that? And you're going to be like, yes. Of course, who wouldn't? Some people are going to be like, well, just one little tiny bit? Like, why not a whole lot? Because those people are probably going to be like, the perfectionist. And honestly, I'm the perfectionist type. I'm that person. I'm the person that kind of like sends homework and I'm just going to try to do it. And there's like 3 things you were supposed to do. I'm going to try to do 7 because like, well, there's some things in here that he didn't ask me to do, but I still wanted to do. So I am totally understand exactly what we're talking about here because I'm the same way. But perfection sometimes can be exhausting. It happens to me all the time. So 3 simple strategies here. Number 1, we're going to establish your MEF. And you're like, what the heck is MEF? We're going to establish a MEF for your healthy habits, which is what we call your minimum effective dose. And what is the minimum effective dose? Minimum effective dose is simply, I want you to think about a marathon. Okay? And I have talked about this in the past, and you're listening to this, you're a client, you're like, yes, Andres, like you're beating that horse to death. But it's a reality, and that's why I kind of love to use this analogy. If you start a marathon, and I never run a marathon, by the way, probably need to do that at some point in my life. But I have run like, half marathons or at least like half marathon lengths in an obstacle course race. I think I did a Tough Mudder one time in Texas, and I've done like stuff like that. But anyways, like when you start running a marathon typically for good times can be anywhere between 4 to 6 hours or so, like average for some people. Right? That's a long time. Now, imagine that you started that marathon sprinting 90 to 100% of your like capacity. Like you are not going to last a minute if you do that. Right? So you started off way too fast. So imagine every single time that you start a diet that you start sprinting so fast. What's going to happen? You're simply going to get tired and you're simply going to give up. So instead, what you need to, that's one scenario. So your sprinting is one thing. And the other part is going to be like when you're just simply going way too slow and like you're barely moving, like you get tired of it. So what we try to do, like we don't want to be in the opposite side of the spectrum or the extremes. We want to be creating such a sort of a range, right? Where you're just moving slow, but sometimes you can move a little bit faster and you have a nice pace that you can build upon that. So you're having like, you can maybe like run like an 8-minute mile, but it can go up to like 9 to 10-minute miles, somewhere in between. So that's what we call like a minimum effective dose spectrum. And I think about it this way. So consider what's realistic and attainable for your life. And think maybe your minimum effective dose of nutrition is going to be, I'm going to cook most of my lunches. But then dinners and breakfast, it may be something I'm not doing. And perhaps this is coming from a person that was eating every single meal out. Perhaps your minimum effective dose is going to be going from like working out 4 days a week to maybe working out the minimum is like 2. Stretch goals will be 3. Minimum effective dose would be, for example, instead of drinking like a gallon of water every single day, drinking at least like half of that, so you make sure that you're staying hydrated. Minimum effective dose could also be something as simple as, practicing a morning routine, but then you're doing only, like maybe my morning routine typically is like reading a book and getting coffee and doing meditation and like 5 things. Maybe I'm only doing 2, and I'm only doing it maybe like 4 days in the week. That for me is my minimum effective dose, and you define that depending on what you got going on in your life. And some of the days your minimum effective dose is going to be so much more because of the fact that you just simply have a lot more drive to be able to do certain things. But the key is that you never stop moving, because what happens to many people is that whenever they feel like they cannot give all they can in their perfect kind of like scenario here, like 4 days of workouts and cooking every meal and all those different things like that, they just simply just stop completely. So establishing a minimum effective dose is number 1. Number 2, celebrate the small victories. We often get so caught up in working towards a big goal that we forget to celebrate the small ways we progress each day. And the way I explain this, back to analogies here, is going to be very simple. Imagine that there's a mountain that you're trying to climb, and you look at the very top of the mountain and you're like, holy hell, that's so far away. But I'm going to keep staring at the top of it, and I'm going to continue to start thinking how far that is from me right now. And I'm just going to start climbing. I'm just going to be so frustrated because it keeps looking like so far ahead, right? In the process of you doing that, you're not looking down, so you keep stumbling and you keep falling, but you're still looking at the goal. That's what your life is right now when you're trying to focus so much on the 6-pack, on the 100-pound weight loss, or like all the goals that you're trying to achieve, because you're just so fixated on the end goal and the end results that you're forgetting to pay attention to the small things that you need to do every day and celebrating those things. You're forgetting to celebrate that every single step matters. So you're starting to not focus on, again, on the steps that you're taking. So imagine you start taking on a step and you're like, oh my God, I got it closer and closer and closer. Before you know it, you're already kind of closer to the mountain or the top of the mountain, and you didn't even notice this. And this happens all the time. So some examples of celebrating small victories is, well, you were feeling like crap all these, for the past 6 months, and now you're feeling more energetic in the mornings. You're lifting more weights in the gym, like you're hitting PRs. You're not really eating out of emotion. You actually don't even feel like the cravings for things anymore. You have a positive mood. People even talk about it. You're trying out a new recipe. You're doing these small little things that are massively impacting. You went on a walk. These are small victories, and celebrating them accounts for a ton. Going back to that 1% better every day. So stop focusing too much on the top of the mountain and start focusing a little bit more on every step that you're supposed to take. You already know where you're going. You already set the goal of where you're heading towards to. Now start to focus on the steps that you're taking and the next step that you're gonna go forward to. I think there's somebody that said say about it, but I'm terrible with that, so I'm not even gonna reference to it. But he talked about I think a journey, that's it. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one single step. And I don't know exactly who said it, but I keep reminding myself of that. So a lot of times it's that one step that you need to be taking. And last but not least, and what that's I'll leave you to kind of get on with your days, is going to be to redefine what success means to you. Sometimes we make failure so easy and success so difficult for ourselves because we set the bar so high. And I'm all about setting high expectations, because a lot of times it's important for us to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. But there's a difference between setting the bar unrealistically high and realistically high. For you is maybe set the bar for success a little bit lower in a spectrum or a size that is going to be ideal for you. So here are some examples of what that may look like for you every day. If we eat one cookie, we might say we fail. While to consider a day successful, we might say we need to exercise and meditate and eat lots of vegetables and drink 8 glasses of water, all these different things, right? So instead of and, say, let's switch to something like or. So for example, I'm successful if I exercise, or if I meditate, or if I eat vegetables with lunch. So instead of trying to make this long laundry list of things that you're supposed to do to be successful, then start making a list of, okay, this or this or this or this. If I hit any of these options, maybe a couple of them today, I was successful and I did something good today. Small successes always add up. Back to James Clear, 1% better is going to always add up. So with that, I leave you to this. Progress is always going to be better than perfection. We just created we have new t-shirts. And if you see it at the back, it says consistency over perfection. Because it's a motto that I try to kind of focus on every day. Showing up every day. Like making one good nutrition choice, one good movement choice, going on a walk, like doing one or the other thing. And eventually things are going to become so habitual that you don't even have to try to work towards these things. And I promise that when you start to see this down the line, and then like Steve Jobs said, you start to connect the dots moving like backwards, not looking forward, because you start to realize that you started to build so many different things into your lifestyle that they're now done on autopilot and you don't even have to think too hard about it. And then at that point, you can start to add more things into what you do every single day. So hopefully this is helpful to all of you guys, and it gives you kind of like more clarity on really what this is. And again, I leave you to something to reflect on, which is going to be, and I want you to start to think about this week, what is perfection for you right now in your life? How do you define this? Is it going to be at work trying to be the best that you can be? Is it going to be trying to be the perfect dad or the perfect mom or the perfect sister or the perfect husband or wife? Is it going to be trying to be the perfect, athlete, or the perfect person that is like trying to make all the right choices as far as nutrition? And sometimes you find in yourself repeating in that cycle that is just so exhausting and you're just simply so tired of doing that. Write these things down. The second thing I want you to start to think about is like, what is your goal? And stop to pay attention too much at the end goal and start to focus on what is success to you, and create that or addition in that list of things that you're supposed to do. Eat out, cook more meals at home, or maybe like go work out or doing different things like that. And start to actually work in this list of smaller things that are going to lead to bigger changes. That is going to be a key thing. And then also last but not least, like figure out what is like your minimum effective dose. So there are weeks in which like you will not be able to kind of give your all. So you can still focus on making really smart choices. So with that, guys, I leave you on this episode of the Nutrition Blueprint podcast. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully it was informative. And most importantly, hopefully it would help you make smaller changes into your lifestyle. Thank you guys so much for listening in, and I will see you guys on the next episode of NBP. Take care.